All right, so this video is a follow-up to the previous video that I just posted talking about how therapy, self-help, social apps, and dating apps have more or less ruined modern love. And what I want to do in this video is provide more practical and useful solutions to the problems that I pointed out in those videos and share exactly why I think those are useful and helpful and why I think the problems are really occurring in a general sense in the first place. And I believe my suggestions can help increase the chance of two people connecting and relating on a basic human level, which can then, on the next step, make possible genuine communication a possibility, and then can make the possibility of a real romantic connection much more likely. I think really the biggest thing is it comes down to developing basic adult life skills like impulse control, personal responsibility, personal accountability, and having actual realistic expectations. Because many of the problems are occurring because people are more often than not functioning like a kid in a candy store. And they have this mindset where they want all the reward without any of the risk. They want all the power without any of the responsibility. They basically want to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, without any consequences. Which, just so we're clear, is basically the basic mindset and psychology of a child. So it's like if we're just chasing chemical highs, novelty, attention, validation, and stimulation, then of course we're going to end up feeling quite empty. So of course the solution to that would be to develop obviously basic adult signs of maturity and basic adult life skills. And I think the first and foremost, most important, useful thing, if you took nothing else from this video and nothing else from anything else you heard for the rest of the day or for the rest of the week or rest of the month or whatever, is to actually develop the ability and the capacity to be brutally honest with yourself first and foremost. And obviously that's going to be predicated on a degree of self-esteem, a degree of self-awareness. But again, those are all things that can be developed and improved. And oftentimes they are developed and improved through being honest with ourselves. Because people will do anything to avoid admitting what they already know to probably be true, or even acknowledge what they already know that they're already feeling. They'll run in any different direction and do any other manner of different thing to just avoid that basic thing. People will exist in dysfunctional relationships for decades because they can't just say the basic thing that they want to say to the person, probably because they can't even admit it to themselves first and foremost. So whether you're just a person living on the planet in the modern age, or you're trying to date or trying to have a relationship or trying to use apps, this is the first most important foundational thing. Because if you're completely deluding in yourself, you're completely deceiving yourself, you're lying to yourself, you're misrepresenting yourself internally, you're not going to see it in other people. It's going to be invisible to you. They're going to present deceit, delusion, dishonesty to you, and it's going to seem to you as the truth because that's what you're doing to yourself, and that's going to mirror perfectly, and that's going to feel comfortable. But then, of course, that's going to produce a negative outcome. Whereas if you're, to whatever relative degree, actually honest with yourself, truthful, forthright, and also, of course, kind and considerate, then when people bring that to you externally, you will see it for what it is. You will see that for the delusion, for the deceit, for the dishonesty, or just will feel wrong or off. And then that is, again, one of the most important useful things that I think anyone can do and use, especially as it pertains to social media, which is basically full-on deceit and delusion and many other things. So another really important thing that goes along with that is having some degree of personal responsibility and accountability. And more often than not, it seems like people rather join a pathology fraternity rather than acknowledge and attempt to solve their own problems. They'd rather say, oh, this thing is the problem. So rather than me looking at myself to see why I arrived at these conclusions or what choices I made that arrive at these outcomes, I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm going to go find other people that also think this thing is bad. And then we're going to together talk about how the thing is bad, but we're not actually going to do anything to solve any of our own problems or issues. Which again is not really an adult behavior, because I think at least as a mature adult, it used to be like having some degree of personal responsibility and accountability, because some things we can control and there's a lot of things we can't. Obviously that's true. Some things are legitimately circumstantial, legitimately social or cultural or systemic, obviously, but we always have to kind of at least look at what we can control, what we can do, and what we can do to at least set ourselves up for a more the more likelihood of a positive outcome or desirable outcome or whatever. So the next thing from that is really looking at ourselves and asking, what value do we genuinely bring to the table? How would we genuinely be an asset to someone else's life? Because the relationship is two people. And if we're just showing up wanting to get what we want and focusing on our needs, our desires, what we feel entitled to, what we deserve, and we're hyper focusing on ourselves, then it's probably not going to work. Or we're going to attract someone who's equally as self absorbed, or we're going to attract someone who's just a wimp and is just going to serve our needs exclusively. But the thing is, none of those real dynamics are based on respect or consideration. So it's probably going to end in failure or conflict. Likewise, if you're just only focusing on the other person, then that's going to probably end in conflict as well. And I can tell you, I've just from a personal thing of dating, I talked to dozens of women, and I would more or less say, like, okay, if sex is off of the table, like, what do you feel like you bring to a relationship? What do you feel like you add to someone else's life? What are your strengths? What do you feel like you really could complement someone with? And in the dozens of people that I asked, no one had any answers. Because I would ask men under different circumstances what they think they would add to a female's life, whatever, and they also had no answer. So it made me think, wow, people really aren't reflecting on themselves at all. They're more so just thinking about what they want to get, what they deserve, and whatever other crazy thing. But it's like you actually have to look at, what do you bring to the table? What value do you have? What are your weaknesses? What are your down spots? What are the BS that other people are going to have to put up with? Like, you just have to be genuinely confident or stable enough to see yourself in a fairly realistic way. So the next thing is basically learning to communicate and articulate your thoughts and feelings, to basically say what you mean and mean what you say, which, if you're not honest with yourself, that's going to be difficult. If you're not really having any personal responsibility or accountability, it's going to be quite difficult. If you don't see yourself in any accurate way at all, you don't genuinely know your strengths, your weaknesses, what you bring, how you would be an asset to someone else's life, then your ability to communicate is going to be massively hindered and undermined, because what you're going to be communicating is based on either nothing, or it's based on a lot of confusion, which again is just probably more of the thing we're trying to get out of. So again, recapping, being brutally honest with ourselves, developing some degree of personal responsibility and accountability, and then genuinely looking at ourselves. What value do we bring to the table? How will we be an asset to someone else's life? What BS or nonsense are they going to have to put up with from having us around? Because let's face it, none of us are perfect. No one we meet is perfect. It's part of just being human, and also just part of being an adult. And then finally, learning to actually communicate and articulate your thoughts and feelings. I think if people could do these things, or at least get on the road to, or at least initiate the process of trying to do those things, then I think not only would their personal life improve and many of the negative emotions they feel would be minimized, but then it would set themselves up for much more success for relating with other people and possibly having a great connection. Because if your connection is based on being confused, chasing novelty, then what do you think the outcome of that is going to be? Probably just more of those things. And then I think last but not least, love and connection is something that we really can't control. We can't coerce it. We can't force it. We can't really contrive it. And that's part of why we probably chase it, part of what makes it so appealing, and part of what makes it the thing. But trying to do apps and all of these things that people do is oftentimes the opposite. They think they can control it, coerce it, force it, contrive it, or this person checks all these boxes, so we must be compatible, or just get caught up in some mental confusion, and then they end up anxious, sad, depressed, dissatisfied, all these negative things. But they think, oh, well, the problem is the app, or the problem is the person. They don't look at themselves and realize maybe the approach was not correct in the first place. And then just realizing, statistically speaking, the odds are against you on dating apps unless you happen to be in the top percentage in terms of attractiveness, which even then the odds are against you in terms of compatibility, because you're getting a lot of people that are just wanting you for whatever your superficial perceived attractiveness is. And realizing that, practically speaking, most people aren't for you, Practically speaking, most conversations won't go anywhere. Practically speaking, most dates really won't go anywhere. And that's just par for the course. That's just the name of the game at this point. And that's okay, and that's part of it. But if you can at least have the qualities that I listed before, and you can use those experiences as opportunities to develop and build and improve those qualities, then at least you will walk away feeling positive and feeling like, oh, I got a lot out of this. And then you can give that to the other person, where even if there is conflict, even if things don't work out, you can at least both leave realizing, oh, I really learned a lot. I have more clarity. I have more degree of honesty with myself. I see things in a more useful and practical light. And that might not always be comfortable. That might not always be enjoyable or positive in the moment, but in the long term, it will probably be useful regardless, because at the end of the day, like, we're all people, and we don't always say things in the absolute perfect way that we could have said it, or we don't behave or respond in the absolute best way we could have. People get their feelings hurt. We're all sensitive. We all have insecurities. Like, that's just part of dealing with people, and that's part of trying to be an adult and develop the qualities that I listed above. And then hopefully people are trying to do the same. And if they aren't, then again, they're probably not for you, or at least you can at least show them some example of it. Because again, you can't just sit back and blame other people, blame the apps, blame the companies, blame the structures, if you're not actually willing to do anything for yourself or take any degree of personal responsibility. To me, that just doesn't make sense. It's like saying, it's raining outside, so I shouldn't exercise today. It's like, well, I have a room that I could do plenty of exercises in. I have a gym that I could go to and do exercises in. Oh, but it's raining, so forget it. That goes by for a month. That goes by 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. I didn't exercise, I didn't do anything. I didn't make any progress. And then I'm going to go turn on the TV and be like, oh, the reason why I'm out of shape is because there's all these food commercials and because I had all this food in my cabinet. And that's why I'm out of shape. But it's like, well, no, you're out of shape because you made a decision to blame something fairly unrelated, which was, oh, it was raining. And then you avoided making all these decisions that you could have made, that could have made a difference, that could have made a positive impact on your life. But you chose not to. So you're blaming all these things that sure have validity and sure have some truth, but you're also ignoring all the stuff that you could be doing and you could be taking action on, which in one day doesn't make that much difference, but then stretched out over a year makes a big difference. 5, 10, 20 years, that's a life, and that makes a difference. So obviously, all the little things that I talked about might seem trivial, might seem basic, might seem like, oh, whatever, but at the end of the day, they make a big difference, especially at the low point that we're in culturally, and especially stretched out over a long period of time.